All right, so let's dive into object-oriented programming. So to start off, we're going to define what a class is. So a class is a collection of attributes that are defined for any object, as I wrote up here. And so each class has attributes which include data members, which are the class and instance variables, and methods. So to actually define a class, the syntax is written as follows. So you have class, and then you also have the name. As you can see, everything's highlighted in Sublime Text. So, and then after that, we have something called the docstring, which is basically a short description of the class itself. So this is just going to say descript, desk, like that, and there you go. And then you have, after that, you have the body. So we're going to actually illustrate how this all works with actually an example itself. So we're going to simulate complex numbers with a class. So we're going to define a class, call it complex, and then we're going to have our docstring. This class simulates complex numbers. There you go. And then we're going to have our constructor. So our constructor method. So it's written the following way. So we have def, 2 underscores, init, 2 other more underscores, and then we're going to have 3 attributes: self, real, and imag. So we have our real and imaginary parts. And what this method does, it creates new instances. So keep in mind that class methods are created in the same way as regular ones. However, the only difference is that we have this self argument here, which is always placed first in our argument list. So after this, we're going to add our colon, and then we're going to write the following. So self.real equals real, and we're going to have self.imag equals imaginary. So imag. So these represent our real imaginary parts respectively. So these attributes are instance variables. Instance variables are defined by self dot whatever the name is. So this is an instant variable itself. So we can conclude that this real and self.real are not the same thing. And the same thing goes for the imaginary part as well. What this is this is the instance variable, and this is the constructor argument. So now that we've done this, we want to, let's say we want to create an instance of our class. So we have our variable and we set it equal to the type, the class itself. So as you can see, it auto-filled to our class's name, and we define our arguments. So we want to have the imaginary part and the real part equal to 1. So, and then when we want to print this out or access these values, we do, for example, we want to print, we have c.real, comma, c.imag. So we're accessing these values directly. And hold on, I made a mistake somewhere. Here we go, just let me check. Complex, line 13. So, what is it? What is going on here? Oh, right. I forgot something up here. Why is it giving me an error? Attribute error object has no attribute. Oh, that's of course. I have a minus here instead. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. So upon defining a constructor, we pass the arguments like we just did. And this includes, so self, we use self, we're actually using self here. So when we want to pass values in our arguments, we're basically passing self and the other arguments themselves. So we're actually passing 3 here. So what we're going to do now is, let's say assume we want to instantiate a complex number where we only care about the real part, real component of that number. So let's say we have 2. As you can see, it got an error. So what we like to do, good practice, is for the interpreter's sake, we use try and catch statements. So we're going to try 2, and then we're going to say except exception e as e colon, and then we're going to say print re. As you can see, wait, hold on, C complex. Oh, I forgot. Here we go. I should have put this inside the exception, so cancel, cut that. There we go. And as you can see, it's missing a match. So what this did, it only passed 2 arguments instead of the expected 3, as we said before. So what we need to do in order to fix this error, we have to define our default values of our constructor arguments. So here we have 0, and we're also going to have, for the imaginary part, 0. As you can see, it's going to work now. So the real part is 2, and the imaginary part is 0. Okay, moving on. So what we did here is basically we just print everything out. Everything is all good. So now in our next example, let's say we want to pass sequences to our class itself. So we're going to do that in the following way. So let's erase this. So C equals complex. And then we're going to say our 2 attributes are as follows: 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, like this. So these are our attributes. And then when we print them out, everything is fine and dandy. But what we're going to do later on, we want to, let's say, because if this is the case, if everything's fine and dandy when we add sequences, then we can put in anything here. So what's to stop the user from inputting characters, which is basically not what this class does. It's a simulation of complex numbers, and you can't have other things other than float integers as our passed arguments. So what we're going to do inside our constructor method, we're going to define some restrictions to our constructor arguments. So we're going to say if the real component is not a integer or float, then or if no, we don't need if, or if the imaginary part is not the same case, if it's not in integer or float. So if it's not a float or integer, if it's not a type int or float, then we're going to raise the exception. We're going to say, hey, this is not a args. We're going to say args not, let's say args are not numbers. So we're going to say, okay, so you have to input numbers. So we're going to build this. As you can see, we got the exception, args are not numbers. And so keep this in mind that try, we're going to actually add try back here. So this is it's a good practice to have try and except statements, because it's generally good practice, and it's for the sake of the interpreter. So except exception as e, and then we're going to say print e. Oops. And we have so here we go. Wait, indentation. Wait, what? Oh, right. See, it even defines our indentation errors. So there we go. And it got rid of all that error, that bunch of garbage text we didn't want. So now it just says args are not numbers. So, and then when we fix this, it's pretty much, so let's say this is 2, and this is 3, 4, okay, 4. And then there you go. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial. We hope to see you next time.